Hey, my name is Noel Elie, and I am an actress, director, wellness influencer, and the CEO of Noel Elie Productions. On today's podcast, we talk about divorce, disease, and shadow work.
Are you ready for a wild ride? I'm Alexis Artin, and I invite you to strap in because this is more than a podcast. This is Look at Me Now. Hey, back with another episode of Look at Me Now. And I've got the wiggles in my body because I have Noel Elie here with me today. And she's a dear friend and she is so many things to me. But I'm actually going to toss the intro over to her and let her introduce herself to all of you. Hi, honey.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Like Alexis said, my name is Noel Elie, and I am an actress and a director and a wellness advocate doing some influencing things. And I am the CEO of a production and PR company called Noel Elie Productions.
I mean, who says you can't have and be it all?
You know, Jill of all trades.
Let's go. She is the embodiment of a woman who gets to do, have, and be it all. And that is why we are friends.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a reflection of you. So.
Oh, please. Okay. It's true.
Yeah.
Hi, honey.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Look at Me Now is a really beautiful umbrella for how resilient we are as human beings. And knowing you as well as I do, I know that you are resilient AF. And I want to start by, as we do on this podcast, looking back on the timeline of your life and looking at you as a little girl growing up. And first of all, why don't you tell everybody sort of like your origin story?
Sure. So the first 9 years of my life, for the most part, I lived in Florida, Sarasota, Florida. And then in fifth grade, I moved to South Carolina and lived in Greenville, South Carolina until I was 18, and then moved to New York 2 days after I graduated high school.
Absolutely. And in growing up, you hit some interesting snafus, some interesting challenges. Yeah. Is there any in particular that stand out to you?
God, many. I grew up in a family where we loved hard and we fought hard. And there financially things were a struggle. So when I was maybe in ninth grade, my family, we lost our home, we lost our cars, we lost everything we owned, and lived in 1-bedroom apartments as a family of 6, lived in hotels. I would sometimes collect change on the street to put enough gas in my car to get to school. But no one knew. Like, I guess because I'm an actress, I was really good at pretending. And so no one had any idea that like the reason sometimes we were able to pay our bills and eat was because my brother and I were working to support my family. And my dad had to go away at times. And that was really challenging. And they definitely, I can look back now and see I went through many initiations over and over and over and over.
Yeah. And I know that for you, it was all colored also by the fact that you were, a girl or a woman going through all of these challenges, on top of the fact that you didn't necessarily look like everybody else around you, especially in South Carolina.
Yeah, I was the strange brown girl. And so I can remember when I was in 5th grade, my first day of school, I was so excited. And I walk in and everyone's like, "What are you?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? What are you?" They're like, "What color are you?" I'm like, "White? I don't know." And they would say, "Let me see your gums." And they would lift up my lips and I'd show them my gums and they'd go, "Oh, okay, you're fine." I'm like, "What does that mean?" they said, well, your gums are red, which means you're white. But if they were purple, that means you're Black or Mexican. And so that was, and then in high school too, they didn't know what category to put me in for prom queen, either majority or minority. And so this was just like how I grew up. I didn't know how fucked up it was. I knew how I felt, which it wasn't great, but it wasn't until I moved to New York and someone said, tell me about your background. And I said, oh, well, I was a cheerleader. And I had no idea what they were talking about. And I realized they were like, no, what's your ethnicity? I had never been asked so kindly. It was more of an accusation, like, what are you? And you were either going to get it right or you were going to get it wrong. And so it wasn't until I moved out on my own and lived in New York where I start to, look back and see all the fucked up things that.
Yeah. And how would you say that has all influenced you now that you are, a grown woman who has done a lot of self-growth and healing work to regain your self-agency and all of these things, over all of the things that you had to externally manage in all of these outer world experiences? What have you learned?
How to have a thick skin, and how to always see the glass half full. One thing I never say is what else can go wrong, because everything can go wrong, actually. Sure. And so I've learned how to really cultivate joy, even in some of the worst times of my life.
And what do you credit when you say I've learned to do that? Because most people who grow up with an immense amount of challenge like you don't end up looking at the world with a glass half full perspective. They end up angry and they end up looking for all the other things that could go wrong, and definitely seeing the world not through rose-colored glasses. So how did you learn? What did you learn?
My parents were really good examples of people of faith. They just always have had faith. And both my parents have been through and have lived gnarly lives, very full lives. And my mom passed away in 2016, as you know, from cancer. And the last 6 years of her life, she thrived. She was so full of joy and wanted to live. And seeing the way my parents were such beautiful examples of finding happiness during the tough times, that's just what I saw. So it's what I gained. But also I think what it is I just always like to have a good time. I always want to have fun. I always want to laugh. And so like being angry is okay for a second, but then I'm over it. I'm like, no, I want to laugh. And so I just go to joy because it's more fun.
Absolutely. That is definitely who I know you to be, for sure.
Yeah.
And I look at all of that in the past that you have overcome and the challenges. And then I see a tremendous amount of investment in transforming your reality, transforming your perspective, really committing yourself to doing growth work, whether that's on a physical level from illness, whether that is on an emotional level from heartbreak, right? Whether that's on a mental level in terms of gaining knowledge and skills and abilities to, we'll stick a label on it, improve yourself, right? But what was it that really propelled you into that growth work, into that growth mindset, into the commitment to really transform yourself? And what was it that even needed to be transformed?
I remember when I was 19 and I was dating my high school boyfriend, I can remember sitting with him. We got high one night and we were sitting in the hot tub and it was snowing outside, and he came from all this money and was offering all of these things. And I just remember sitting there going, is this it? Is this my life? And I just wanted more. I thought there could be more, not from a material standpoint, but like, I know there's so much out there that I don't know. And so I have just become so eager of being a student of life and not settling and expanding. And so I don't know, it's just this like hunger and thirst for more, but not from a gluttonous place, from a place of like, I want more peace. I want more joy. How can I better myself to attract that?
And in what ways do you think you've been successful at attracting that?
Good question. Well, having people like you in my life. And I mean, where I came from, I should not be technically, I shouldn't be where I am today. I could have gone a very different route. And a lot of my friends who went through similar hardships, they got pregnant at 18, aren't with the baby daddy. And, they went a very different route. And I think the life that I've created for myself, even though, as you know, lately I've been going through it in the lion's den, I still have an incredible community of people around me who love me and see my shadow and love me through it. And, you've been one of my biggest cheerleaders in my life. And so, the fact that I've been able to call that in, that's proof in and of itself.
Let's talk about the lion's den. Let's get right in there into that den.
As we do.
As we do. I mean, no, really, tell our people, because I actually already know most of it, but tell me about this.
Yeah. So in 2019, I moved to LA from New York, and I had sat my husband down and said, I love you. I have to go. I'm moving to LA. You can come or not. We'll figure it out. And, it would have been cool if I maybe had a discussion with him and didn't just announce to him that I was leaving, but I had no choice. I had to go. And I moved to LA and loved it and was thriving. And then I got really sick. Really, really sick. And I was diagnosed with over 10 fibroid tumors in my uterus. I had Lyme disease. I had mold toxicity, co-infections, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And COVID happened. And then my ex-husband moved to LA with me, and we were good for a minute. And then we both just continued to get really, really sick. And so I went on this massive healing journey, found plant medicine, found other healing modalities, and did everything I could to heal myself physically. And through that, started to discover, we are only as sick as our secrets. And I had secrets I was holding on to. One of them being that I stepped outside of my marriage and I was killing myself, actually killing myself with guilt. And so one day I sat him down and told him, and we talked about it. And then I said, do you have something to tell me? And he then revealed he also stepped outside of our marriage, and we both did it around the same time. And then we became closer than ever. It was the best relationship of our lives. There were no secrets. We weren't walking around on eggshells. We were just free and clear and madly in love. And then in 2022, that changed, and we grew apart and we stopped seeing each other. And then a lot of other things happened, but we ended up getting a divorce. And this last year has been the hardest year of my life. Losing my mom in 2016 was the worst thing I had ever been through. I didn't think it could get any more worse. I didn't think it could get bad, as bad as that. And it did. And because it's one thing, I was with him, as you know, for 18 years, and he was my best friend. And him and I, once we separated, we jumped into new relationships. And all of the sudden, he wasn't in my life. And so knowing he was living with another woman 4 blocks away, not talking to me, I at least wanted my friend, It's like, okay, you're not my husband. You're not my lover. You're not my boyfriend, but like, where's my buddy?
Right.
Where'd he go? And all of a sudden I'm not allowed to talk to him. It was fucking devastating.
Well, I'm curious. You said you went from having the best relationship of your life to not seeing each other.
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through that.
I dove in to plant medicine pretty hard, and I was on this mission to heal myself. And I did. I healed 2 of the fibroid tumors naturally.
Mm-hmm.
I healed myself of Lyme disease and got the mold down, and because of that, I just went full steam ahead. And, like I get sort of attached to something. I'm all in for like a year or 2. And then I'm like, all right, I'm bored. What's next?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's very self-aware of you. Yeah. Sure. Yes.
Yeah. And so, do that being part of it, he was like not into it. And
to the plant medicine,
and started to turn away. And so I'm not necessarily, we didn't know how to communicate. And so I'm like thinking maybe he's just depressed. I don't really know what's going on, but we would try to communicate, but not get through to each other. I'm still on this path, on a mission to heal, not really understanding that like I needed to slow down a minute. And we just like, there was no intimacy into me see, right? And I'm like, let me in. Where'd you go? Where'd you go? Let me in. And we didn't know how to bring that back. And also we didn't get help, which is like ridiculous.
Sure.
But that's a huge part of it. And so we stopped seeing each other. And he used to be an acting coach and, he's phenomenal. And I would take his classes and I loved it because it was this window into my soul where he would really see me and I would see him. And when that stopped, it was like we both had stopped acting due to COVID and getting sick and all of that. So it was like this thing that kept us together for so long was gone. And neither one of us were making the effort to repair that or find these new tools to really see each other. And so instead of seeing each other, we just went different directions.
Yeah, it kind of falls into that concept of, we're all always growing, but are we growing together or are we growing apart?
Right.
And I can clearly hear the direction in which you were growing and going.
Mm-hmm.
And would you say that he was growing in other ways? Because we all are always growing, but where are we growing?
Right.
Where are we moving towards? Was he moving in the direction of just defiance and judgment of where you were growing?
Partially, yes. And if you would have asked me even several months ago, I would have said, yes, absolutely. But I think what happened is we had different values because we got together when I was 20 and he was 23. Mm-hmm. So our values at that age were quite different. And even a year ago, my values were different than what they are now. And so I think our values were so vastly different that there was just no compromise. And so the ways I wanted him to grow, he wasn't growing in that way for me. Mm-hmm. And then I was in turn judging it. And vice versa. And so I think we both were growing in different ways, but I was judging him for his pace of growth. Mm-hmm. And instead of having compassion and valuing the ways he was amazing, I was judging what he wasn't doing. It sounds like you
guys are doing the expectations versus agreements situation.
100%.
Where, for people that haven't heard the idea of expectations versus agreements, it's this concept of, you and I make a deal, that we're going to meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And I show up at 9 a.m. bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you're not there until 9:15. And now I'm angry because I had an expectation that you were going to show up at 9 and now you're a problem for me. Mm-hmm. Versus making the agreement of we're going to meet at 9 o'clock the problem,
Right.
not you, the problem, the agreement, the problem, and going, okay, well, maybe 9 o'clock doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we need to revisit an agreement that is going to work better for both of us. If you can't be here at 9, then maybe we revisit moving it to a time that works for both of us. And if that's 9:15, great. But it is, again, this idea of, if it's expectation oriented, you're the problem. Where if it's agreement oriented, it's the actual logistics that are the problem and need to be moved. And it sounds like, in terms of the values, that, the reason that couples thrive or don't thrive is this concept of, I know what your highest values are, and I know what my highest values are. And we get to see how you help me achieve my highest values, and I help you achieve your highest values. And whatever values we can't help each other meet, we agree that we're willing to delegate those things.
Right. 100%.
And a lot of times the reasons relationships don't work is because we aren't aware of those things, and we aren't actively working towards the goal of each of us helping each other achieve what matters most.
Totally. And it's, you nailed it. And it's also, to be fair to him, when my mom got sick, she, when she got cancer, it was in 2010, 2011. And so I went on this crusade to save her life for 6 years. And then when she passed, I then was in the state of grief. And then I got sick and then was focused on and so for him, like he was able to see a lot of the issues. I was in denial of it because I was so focused on other instead of our sacred union. And so, it's all of it,
Yeah. And it's interesting because you shared about your growing up, right? How resourceful you had to be in order to survive, in order to land on your feet, in order to get your needs met. And it sounds like maybe there was some sort of an overlap of your survival strategies when it came to being in relationship and having to meet someone else's survival strategy needs.
Yeah.
That it could have gotten really, really complicated for you guys.
Yeah. And it did.
Yeah. Well, and in the present moment, where are things?
Things are, we both, after a year of taking space and not being in each other's lives, we're friends again and we're in each other's lives again. And we both have left said partners. And we are able to take accountability and have, all I wanted for the last year was like, let's just have some sort of like, let's have some sort of ceremonial type of day where we honor the relationship in the 18 years. And he was like, no, not into it. And so now in ways like we're getting that often, and it's been so beautiful. And we both are able to really see our part. And I would love to get some sort of therapy where we are able to communicate about in a safe, contained way about some of the things that happened in the 18 years we were together. And maybe that'll happen. But right now I've been taking such inventory of not only the last 18 years, but the last year and the ways I was, a bit too ferocious and needing to be heard and needing to be seen. And I'm in the place where how can I just be a vessel of unconditional love and forgiveness? If this person means as much as I say he does, how can I be that? And so since I've taken accountability in that way and chosen that, not from a place of being a doormat or having no boundaries, but just truly like, oh, wow, he has taught me. I believe we come into this life with certain agreements and soul contracts. What he was to teach me is how to be a vessel of unconditional love, because in the last year, he has not done anything I've wanted him to do. And I've been so angry, so full of rage. And I'm like, okay, that's when you love harder. When they're not doing what you want, do you pull away? Are you punishing? Or do you still love? Do you still have an open palms and an open heart? And so.
And how do you negotiate that with also not being a doormat?
So for me, it's recognizing when things don't feel good and I feel crunchy inside. So when my body is saying, oh, he's sharing too much about his relationship, that doesn't feel good. It's then my job to say, hey, pause, I can't actually. Or like, this is how I'm feeling. Can we talk about it? Versus stuffing it down, pretending like it's okay because I'm unconditional love in air quotes. No, it's like, unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance. And so
that's a huge distinction right there.
Yeah. And so I get to walk this line of how can I show up for this person in this way and still protect myself and still protect my heart. And it's a dance that I'm learning how to do that I've never done before.
Absolutely. And it's about establishing healthy boundaries for yourself and for somebody else. And other people may not love having a boundary set, especially if they're not used to having a boundary. Also, I'm curious how it changed the dynamic of the relationship when you went from sort of guardrail to guardrail, showing up with such an extreme ferocity of this is what I need from you. This is what I need from you. And then literally the pendulum swinging all the way into the opposite direction of I'm just going to unconditionally love you. And I'm going to put down all of that ferocious hunger and need and heaping that all on you, making all of that your responsibility to give me what I need. Like, how has that shifted things?
I started giving myself what I needed.
Say more about that.
So what I wanted from him was to like hold space for me, to see me in my anger, to see me in my grief, to, ask him questions and get things answered. And the reality is when we were 20 years old, when I was 20 years old and he was 23, I had an eating disorder. I was extremely insecure. I didn't feel like I was enough for him. And so going through what we've gone through, it opened that wound that I thought I had healed because I don't have an eating disorder now, but that wound of not enough-ness is still there. And so I started filling my own cup saying, I got you. And I started doing, I'm doing this somatic practice every day. I've been doing it almost every day for 3 months. And I'm also doing these specific mudras on learning how to control and contain my sexual energy to turn it into wisdom. And that has been so powerful for me because I really see the ways I got my validation from men, including my ex-husband. And so when I knew someone desired me or was attracted to me, I could use that as
a weapon.
Yeah. And I did. And so instead, how can I not have leaky fucking energy, keep it contained, decalcify my pineal gland to turn it into wisdom? How can I hold it? And so how can I show up even at a grocery store when, I used to love making men's heads turn? You know what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah.
Like, how can I keep it contained and know whether anyone looks at me or hits on me or whatever, it doesn't matter because I got me. I know I'm beautiful. I know I'm enough. I know it is a privilege to have me in your life. I know it is a privilege to be a partner with me and to be my lover. How can I take that and hold on to it and go, no, fuck that. I messed up, but like, I got me.
Well, and it's interesting because, there have been a lot of very famous, sexually iconic women in history who intentionally would, from the outside in, like put a big trench coat on and a hat on and really kind of disguise themselves to hide their sexuality or their, iconicness from the world so that they could have a moment to really just feel safe inside of their own skin without having to present as this, this character to the world that is desirable and all of these things. And I was having a conversation this morning on a podcast that I was guesting on and talking about our relationship as women with our own bodies and our own sexuality and what it is to really be empowered, right? And we learn so much growing up from our world and from our society, whether it's true or untrue, right? But we learn so much, let's say, from the experience of people being like, show me your gums, right? I'll tell you how valuable you are. I'll tell you who you are and what you are. And you will take that information, you'll hijack that information, you will make it your own. And through that, then you will measure how valuable you are. You will compare to what our standards are, and a decision will be made about what's possible for you. And it sounds like this has been a journey for you of reclaiming in some way. No, this is who I am. This is what my value is. It's not up for measurement or comparison by anybody else's standards. And I'm certainly not going to settle for anything less, including in my marriage.
I'm 1,000%. And I went to Egypt in January, and I remember I was at the temple of Ra, and Ra is the sun god. And I made this declaration: my divinity is not up for debate. And then from there, this past year has been this reclamation of my sensuality and liberation of my sexuality. And therefore, I've been coming back to myself in exactly the way you're saying. And it's been, I'm really on the other side of it. I feel like I've officially walked through the threshold of being in such victimhood and villainizing him and victimizing myself. And so in such a state of grief, to where now I have such gratitude for it. I mean, it has fucking sucked. I have been on the floor many days, can't get out of bed, just the worst kind of pain I've ever felt. But now I'm so grateful for it, because I now cannot not speak my truth. Like in all the ways I would withhold my truth, not because I was intentionally hiding, but because I wasn't even allowing myself to acknowledge my own truth. And now it's like, it has been a year of truth telling. And
preach, girl.
Preach,
it's
such a gift. And I have friends, you being one of them, who, have always been so honest and so like naming the thing. And I can remember thinking like, oh my God, I don't know if I can ever get there. And now it's like, I have no choice. If I don't tell the truth, I need a fucking shower. I feel disgusting. It's like, no, I got to just name it. And so often naming it, like the truth comes at a price.
Absolutely. And, I love that you're able to own and acknowledge, like, I'm stuck in this story, right? So it's like, there's the villain and there's the victim and there's the hero. And we're always triangulating ourselves into one of these roles and making other people, our counterparts in this, rather than actually stepping outside of the triangle of the story of being one of these three characters and becoming the narrator of the story, really pulling out to that bird's eye perspective and seeing all sides of this proverbial story, and not being sucked into it and absorbed by it, but rather stepping outside of it and going, wait a second, all things considered, right? When I look at all the moving parts of this, I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful that I am here, that I am alive, that I am in this body, that I get to have these experiences, and that I get to learn and grow from them. Who was I talking to the other day? And we were talking about, they were asking me a question, and I was like, oh God, I was like, it was so long ago, I don't even remember. What were we talking about? Well, here we are, people. But we were talking about something, and I was saying, God, it was so long ago, I don't even remember how it sorted out, but it sorted out, right? And I go, God, but at the time that happened, whatever it was that I was talking about, at the time that it happened, it was the biggest deal in the world. I mean, it was something that I'm sure that I was panicked about, and I didn't know how I would get through it. And Lord knows I would never forget. And here I can't even remember what I was even talking about. That, I mean, but it's really so phenomenal that we do in the moment, the story feels so immense.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we are on our knees. We are on the floor. We are in the suffering. We're in the shit. And then it's, 10 years later or whatever. And we are like, fuck, I can't even remember what that was even about. I don't remember the details. I don't even remember how it worked itself out, but it did. And now here I am and couldn't even tell you what it was. Right.
Yeah, it's so true.
And it really is a reflection of how resilient we are, how resourceful we are. That, something my coach tells me all the time is, when you sit in the worry of the other shoe dropping, right? Which I know so many of us do, right? When you're saying like, oh, I'm not really always looking for what else could go wrong, right? But so many people do. So many people are like, it can only get this good for so long, right? Or it'll never be that good for me. And in either scenario, what my coach always says to me is, we will always have the resources to handle anything that is dealt to us.
Right.
And another way of phrasing that a lot of people say is like, God only gives you what you can handle.
Yeah.
Right. And it really is one of those things where our fear is not rational, right? Our fear is always wanting to forecast the worst case scenario as a dress rehearsal to get our resources ready so that when and if that thing were to ever happen, as irrational as it may be, we will somehow be prepared. We will somehow still be standing when it's all said and done, right? And what so often gets lost in that is our ability to trust.
Yeah.
Our ability to trust those resources, our ability to trust our resilience, that we don't have to go to the worst case scenario and forecast or fantasize what that might be in order to keep ourselves safe. And to trust that we will always have the resources to handle anything that is dealt to us, whether that's scraping change off of the sidewalk in order to put food on the table, not just for you, but for the people who are supposed to be putting the food on the table for you, to surviving a marriage that is failing, to learning how to heal yourself from things that people say there's no cure for. And I really want to kind of like throw that back to you and say, what resonates for you as I say all of that? Because I'm really reflecting your story to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's, one of the things you said is you mentioned about like my resilience. And for me, it was like, I had no choice. I could either crumble and not go to school because or eat food because I didn't have money, or I could just figure it out and make it happen. And so although that has served me in many, many ways, including in my career and different things, I see the ways in which that was not super helpful in the last 2 years, because I was in my quest for growth. I was essentially chasing a shiny rabbit. And so it wasn't allowing me to be in the present and be grateful for the person sitting in front of me. And, I focused on the things that weren't being done or weren't being said instead of the things that were. And so it's like, although that's, I love being a student of life, at the same time, how can I come back to the present moment? And so, hearing you say that, it reminds me of something I've also been saying this year, which is, may I find pleasure in the pause. Because I thought when my husband and I separated, we both thought we had to make a decision right away. We didn't take any time before jumping into new relationships. We were in this like race for what? And in the blink of an eye, a year has gone by. And in that year, our dog died of 16 and a half years, Libby. Quiet on the set, Libby.
Quiet on the set, Libby. Quiet on set.
Dan's father passed away. Our marriage dissolved. Our friendship dissolved. Like there was our finances dissolved. Like, so much went wrong. And we were like still chasing some sort of like ticking clock. And so, I don't know. It's like hearing all of that. It's reminding me again to just like, how can I slow down for a second and just really
where does the
ground
pressure
myself.
to speed up come from for you? I mean, I know the pressure to speed up for everybody comes from a driving of fear, but I'm curious for you where the ticking clock comes in.
Well, there's also this like societal norm that like, you know, I just turned 39 and it's like by 39, you should have a family, you should have children, you should have a thriving career. You should, we're shitting all over ourselves. And so it's like, part of it is that. And then part of it is too, I don't know. I think it's mostly that it's been what's been placed upon me. And then, I mean, maybe too, like I'm hard on myself.
Sure.
And so, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. It's sort of that goes back to that idea of the good girl conditioning. And that's why so many women walk around with, I'm too much or I'm not enough.
Yes.
I'm ahead or I'm behind. I'm overwhelmed or I'm underwhelmed. And
compare and despair too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it does harken back to the very beginning of this conversation where I was really honoring that you are somebody that I look at and say, no, we really do get to have it all. We get to wear all of these hats. We get to be all of these things. And you are such an embodiment of that. And yet there is still a part of you that's like, or maybe I shouldn't put words in your mouth from what you just said, but is there a part of you that's like, well, I should, just because other people are saying it, she should be married. She should have kids. She should be also filling out all these other areas of her life. But is that even true for you?
It was. And this last year, I tell a lot of people it's been the teaching of the Magdalens. So Mary Magdalene, I've been kind of diving into a lot of research around her and her life. And the teaching of the Magdalene is like being misunderstood, being called crazy, being labeled as a whore. For her, the woman that she was fucking courageous and she embodied her sexuality and didn't hide it and let her emotions show. And in the Bible, I was raised very Christian. They say she had, Jesus cast out 7 demons. Like the fuck? Did he? Or was she just fucking angry? Or was she feeling sensual? Or was she, was she being a healer? Was she being a witch? Like who says who?
Well, I mean, we're circling around this idea again of like the shadow and the light, right? There's always equal light to equal shadow, and how they've put the virgin on a pedestal, right? And the slut in the pit. And there is such a larger conversation, right? In the patriarchy of things that there is an ideal of a lady in the streets and a freak in the sheets and what is to be seen in the light of day and what isn't. And there is so much conditioning in that of the expectations of a woman and good girl conditioning and all of these things. So it sounds like that has been a cross to bear.
Yeah, it was, especially growing up in the South and being raised very Christian and what was placed upon me. And so there's been a lot of unconditioning with that of, like I said, reclamation of my sensuality and liberation of my sexuality. And
not carrying an apology in your body anymore.
Yeah, it's like...
Or using your sexuality as a weapon.
Exactly. And I'm at the point now where, yeah, of course, sometimes like it doesn't feel great to know that my in-laws say she's nuts or whatever it is. But also I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Call me crazy because I am crazy. We all are. Some of us are just better at hiding it.
Are you crazy or are you emotional? I mean, I feel like that's another thing that women are always juggling is this idea of she's a bitch or she's crazy because she's so emotional or she's this or she's that. And now, is that us just living fully into our truth and into our gifts and into...
It's not hiding. And that's why people judge it as crazy because it's like, no, I'm showing you my shadow. I'm not hiding my shadow. And that's something that I haven't even talked to you about, but I'm going to start teaching next year is a lot of shadow work because I had to go into my shadows. And part of my human design, I'm a 1-3 and the 3 is the martyr, which means we're meant to like fuck up. We're meant to do things the hard way. And then we're meant to share with others and teach others how not to do it the hard way because we did it. And now we know an easier way. So here you go. And so part of that is shadow work.
Yeah. And it's funny because when you talk about you're only as sick as your secrets, so many people feel the need to hide their shadow.
Of course.
And keep it a secret. And some people even find things to be shadows that aren't designed to be shadows. Why does our sexuality have to live in the shadows in a lot of ways? And
it's because it's judged so often and then we don't feel safe.
Yes. And I was going to say, like, even your struggles in childhood, nobody knew.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. Let's keep it in the shadows. Let's not let anybody know that we're vulnerable. Let's not let anybody know that we need help. Let's not let anybody know that we're not perfect because then it might be deemed as unlovable.
Totally. And that was all learned behavior. And this last year, I joke like I'm a shadow spotter. And so I walk around with a flashlight, naming. For a lot of people, it's really uncomfortable when I see it, naming it and just calling it out. But what I've recognized is, let me have a double-ended flashlight. So each time I'm able to see someone else's shadow, I'm able to reflect it back to me and go, oh, right, I have this part of me. And this is when it...
Well, that's the only way you can actually see it is to be able to name it and to know it personally. Otherwise, you'd be blind to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's funny because it's sort of like it's your superpower, but it's also your kryptonite.
Yep.
Interesting.
All about polarity, as you know.
As we know, nothing exists in isolation. It's all equilibrated. Well, I want to do what I do at the end of this podcast because we've looked in the past, we've looked at the present. I want to look at the future. And before I ask you the final question that I always pose, I want to know, what do you see for the future? Besides this awesome shadow work that you're going to do, which I'm all ears for.
Yeah.
By the by.
Thank you. I'm writing a book and we'll turn the book into a screenplay. And it's the story of my life and my love. And I've proposed to my former beloved. I said, because he's such a beautiful writer. I said, you write your story, I'll write mine, and let's create together. How healing. So that's my wish. But whether he does it or not, I'm doing it. So there's that. And I want to call in my king. I want sacred union again. And I'm open to whether it's someone I know or was previously with, or it being someone new. I'm preparing for him. And I know it comes down to divine aligned timing. But I'm excited about what is to come. And I know I want a family and to keep creating and playing and using my story and my circumstances, my previous circumstances and experiences to help other people.
No big deal.
Yeah. Small
Whatever.
potatoes.
Only changing the world
Yeah.
from the inside out. Big deal. Okay. So I'm going to pose the final question to you. I mean, the buildup is just never going to pay off at this point because I've really made it sound like this is like life-altering situation. Okay. So the question is, because this podcast is really, look at me now, it's positioned to sound like, look at me now, world. Everybody with that external gaze, check me out, check at my accomplishments, measure it up, right? But this is not that. This is a look at me now by look in the mirror. Look at what I've achieved. Look at how resilient I've been, and not achieved in a measurable sense, but look what I've overcome. Let me validate and acknowledge myself. Let me really take myself in from a soul level, meaning like source of unconditional love level, what is it that you think needs to be reflected back to yourself as you take that look at me now gaze from that internal, deeply wise, centered self?
Ooh, what a good question. I mean, there's so much I could say. And at the end of the day, I know, heaven forbid, if tomorrow were my final day on earth, I lived life to its fullest. I have felt more than I ever thought was possible. And I haven't hidden any of it. And especially in the last year. And a lot of things that have happened in my life, I prayed into existence. And, it's beautiful, the self-awareness that I now have, and the compassion and forgiveness and love that I have for others, but more importantly for myself. And I've recognized, like, may I not crucify myself or torture myself anymore. May I let it hurt and let it go. And let it love and let it love and love and love and love. Yeah.
Beautiful. Soup's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, I could talk to you for hours. Yeah. I feel like maybe we just need to like launch another podcast where you and I just talk all day, all the time. So who knows? Maybe that'll be coming.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. I love you.
I love you.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. We're so proud of you.
That's right.
We're all proud. Yes, absolutely. We are powerful AF people. All right. This has been another episode of Look at Me Now. We love you.
Love you.
Join us for Look at Me Now, wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to share, like, and subscribe.